Hi everyone, welcome to my studio vlog. This studio vlog is going to have two parts to it. The first is going to be about my anniversary trip with my husband to Washington, D.C. And then the second part will be about my graduate school experience. And I promise you those two stories are intertwined. So we decided to go to D.C. because I was planning it. And I also wanted to take my husband to a place where my graduate school experience there really changed my life. And I wanted to take him to some of my favorite museums, eat some of my favorite foods there, just kind of take him to my old stomping grounds. My husband and I have only known each other for 3 years, and we lived 30 plus years before we even met each other. So there's a lot to share, a lot to partake in, and this was one of them. My graduate school experience in a nutshell is an example of how I thought my life was going to go this one way, and then it ended up blessing me in a completely different way. But more on that later. If you're new here, hi there, my name is Audrey. I'm a teaching artist and I'm based in the Chicagoland area. I'm so glad you're here. I share tutorials, live streams, studio vlogs like this, and product reviews. Stick around because this is probably one of my favorite studio vlogs that I've created so far. So all about our trip to DC. So here are some highlights. So DC is really wonderful. Once you get into DC, using public transportation is so convenient. You can rent a car, but then you got to find parking, pay for parking, and all of that. Public transportation really is easy, but then sometimes it can get overwhelming because you still have to walk to a lot of places. And so if it does get hard, Uber or Lyft or any of those ride sharing apps or taxis are very prevalent. So there are so many sites and things to do in DC. Like I can't even list them all. There's just so many. And we definitely hit a lot of the major Smithsonian museums, probably all of the memorials and monuments. Yeah, and a couple of like unknown places. So I'm just gonna give you the highlights because if I took you through every single day, we would be here for a long time. So we visited some of our favorite museums. First up is the Portrait Gallery. So this is a favorite place of mine because during my graduate school days, if I had, a longer lunch break, or if I happened to be in that area, then I would go here because they have an atrium in the center of their museum, and it is so peaceful, so peaceful. Sometimes I would bring my lunch and just eat there. I would do my homework, catch up on reading, just rest, And I think in the midst of living a city life, having a place like that, yeah, it was so relaxing. And because it's a Smithsonian institution, you don't have to pay. It's completely free. Highly recommend if you go there. And plus the Portrait Gallery is just really cool. They obviously have portraits of people. One of the museums that my husband really wanted to visit was the National Air and Space Museum. Unfortunately, half the museum was closed for renovation, so that was kind of sad, but we still got to see a lot of cool exhibits. We were there for a total of 5 full days. The other 2 days were mostly for traveling in and out. But by day 3 or 4, I knew that we were going to get really tired from walking everywhere. So I booked a bus tour, which I also highly recommend. A particular bus tour took us to all the monuments and memorials. And even though a lot of them are right next to each other, you still have to walk. It's just a lot when you have to walk everywhere. What if it's raining, So this bus tour took us to the Capitol, the White House, not inside the White House, just like to the street, and then to basically every single monument and memorial out there. We also went on a ferry ride down the Potomac River. It was just so cool. I think out of all of the memorials, the FDR Memorial was probably one of my favorites, and it was our tour guide's favorites too. So then when you go there, it's not just a single monument, it's like an entire experience. You actually kind of like go through the path of his terms as president. I didn't notice this the first time I visited many years ago, but there were waterfalls. Again, I remember them, but I didn't realize how important they were because FDR was in a wheelchair. He did his physical therapy in a swimming pool. And so the attachment to water and incorporating those water elements was such an important part of this monument. His wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, also had a statue because she was a huge part of his presidency as well. And his little dog was also memorialized as a statue. So cute. We also went to the Arlington National Cemetery, which I had never visited before. It was really meaningful because we were able to witness the changing of the guard ceremony at the site of the tomb of the unknown soldier. And at that time, there was an honor flight of veterans. And if you don't know about the honor flight, make sure to Google them. We were able to see some of those veterans actually participate in the ceremony and even lay the wreath down at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So it just made me really grateful just where I am of my life here in the US. I know I take it for granted sometimes, to be honest, but I think it's important to be reminded that, yeah, the sacrifices of many make our lives here possible. We also visited a couple new museums. So I graduated in 2012, and after that, they built the Museum of the Bible. And that was just so cool. So cool. Even if you're not a Christian or Jewish or Catholic or anything like that, even if you're a different religion, I still highly recommend going because it just has a lot of historical findings from archaeological sites. So I think it's still worth going. We were able to get in for 50% off because it was after 3 p.m. I don't know if they do that every day, but check the website. After I left, they also built the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and that was really important to me too, so we went there. The building is really beautiful, and each exhibit was just so well thought out. It's a lot of information, but it's really important to document that history as well. Besides the sites, obviously we had good food and good coffee. I'm not much of a foodie, I'll be honest. I don't really seek out the best restaurants or the most expensive restaurants or anything like that. But there was one place that I really wanted to take my husband, and that was Ben's Chili Bowl. So the original location is on U Street Northwest, and it opened in 1958. And they actually donated food to the March on Washington in 1963. So that during the 1960s, it was a place of civil unrest. And there's so much more history that I don't have the time or even the knowledge to go so in depth about it. But if you're ever in DC, you have to check out that area. It's not just the restaurant, but even that whole street was a really important part of the civil rights movement. I think the U Street Northwest is recognized as one of the most significant African American and historic neighborhoods. So aside from all of the, fun and the good times that we had in DC, I really wanted to take my husband to my graduate school, which was the George Washington University. I kind of want to backtrack and give you some background information into why I even went to graduate school, how did I end up there, and how did that inform, my career now as a teaching artist. So growing up, I always wanted to be a teacher. I really love sharing what I know and then witnessing that aha moment that people have when everything just seems to click, right? But even at a young age, I knew that I didn't want to be in a formal school classroom. No shade to our classroom teachers out there because they are true heroes. It was just not for me. Teaching the same thing to the same students over and over and over again, year after year. Well, not the same students, but that just didn't sit well with me. I knew that I would not thrive in that kind of environment. But at that time, I thought if you wanted to be a teacher, that is what you do. I didn't know that there were any other options. So I went to college. I studied art history and chemistry because I thought, oh, maybe I can teach chemistry or maybe I can teach art history. But again, you had to be in some kind of formal setting. I also thought that I could become an art conservationist, but then I realized that that was very much a laboratory kind of job and not one where you would interact with the public much. So I was like, nope. And it's not as glamorous as you might think, you know? It's not like you're restoring huge pieces of artwork every single day. It's mostly like doing experiments and making sure that it's not going to destroy that one piece of artwork that you're working on. So I realized that that was not for me. So I graduated college, and even though I wanted to go into education, I wasn't sure if, you know, again, that formal education route was what I wanted. And so I kind of took a break. I did apply to grad schools at that time, but I ended up not going. I came back home to the Chicagoland area, and then I went to Korea a couple months later, several months later. And my dad was already living out there. And so I lived with him for, I don't know, 6 months or so before I moved out and got my own apartment. But I went to Korea to teach English. A lot of my peers were doing it. I had to pay back my student loans, so I had to make money somehow. And it was a pretty good job. After about 6 months or so, they actually let me teach my own curriculum. And I was like, wait, what? That's so cool. So I decided to teach AP art history because that's what I learned. And that's when I got a taste of what it's like to kind of create your own learning environment and follow the students' like curiosities. You know, like we would look at, you know, a painting or a statue or, you know, any piece of artwork. And one of my first questions to them would be like, what do you see? What did you first notice, right? Like what kind of stands out to you? And then we would kind of follow those patterns, and then we would end up still at the overall goal or objective that I wanted to teach them, but it started with their curiosity, right? Knowing that, I realized, okay, I think I still want to go into education for graduate school, but I still don't want to do formal education. And so that's when I started researching about other types of education out there. And I stumbled across informal education. And then under that umbrella was museum education. Now, if you didn't know, I love museums. And so combining museums and education together, it was like the perfect union, you know? And I started researching different types of universities that offer museum education. And so I applied to a couple schools in the US. I even applied to a school in the Netherlands and even in France. And I ended up not going to any of those. And I ended up going to the George Washington University in Washington, DC, because DC is like the museum capital. So then I started my program in June 2011, and then it ended August 2012. It was 4 semesters, back-to-back, summer, fall, spring, summer, with no breaks. It was really intense. I had a cohort of 11 other amazing women, and we still keep in touch to this day. They're amazing. Throughout my program, I got to intern at the Sackler Museum of Art. I student taught at a DC public school. I learned Adobe products like InDesign and Illustrator. I just learned a lot of tangible and practical skills and that were applicable to my future jobs. But there was one overarching theme or philosophy, if you will, that really shaped me at the core. And that was that I was able to learn how to make mistakes and fail without the fear of judgment or punishment. And that idea comes from this book called The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander and Rosamund Stone Zander. The main gist is that when people have and adopt the attitude of possibility, then they can achieve potential, they can break boundaries that they didn't even know that they had. For me, I grew up in the school system and I was raised the complete opposite, right? If I made a mistake, you get a bad grade, right? You get a lower score, or I get yelled at, or I have to redo it. There's always a consequence for failure. And growing up that way, you start to adopt the mindset of failure rather than possibility. So it made me take less chances. It made me really fearful of messing up. It made me obsessive about perfectionism. Imagine if you came into a project or a test or a situation and you were given an A without even doing the work. Just imagine how that would make you feel. So an A in the US school system, that's the best mark, right? The top score. So this idea transformed me because growing up, I always had to prove myself. I have to show you why I deserve that A. I also wrestled with feeling undeserving of the A because I had done nothing to earn it. And as I progressed in my program, it slowly started to peel off layers of self-doubt, anxiety, perfectionism around my output and productivity. I didn't realize it then, but that was going to greatly inform how I teach now as an artist. Giving an A doesn't mean that we ignore flaws or errors or just gloss over mistakes. I'm not proposing that, but it's being able to create an environment where you feel safe to mess up, where you're not going to be judged or necessarily punished for it, right? But instead it's turned into a learning opportunity. You want to demonstrate in that safe space that there's room for progress, that mistakes are still a mistake, but how can we learn from it? But then also impart confidence so that they can try again. And that's ultimately what I want to cultivate and promote here on my channel and in my business. The wonderful world of art is filled with possibilities, but we can get lost in the weeds, right? Of trying to figure out what supplies to use, which technique to learn next. But the mindset that I hope to share and impart to each of you is that this is a safe space, that you are allowed to make mistakes. I tell this to all of my students in my in-person workshops, please make mistakes. I firmly believe that that is how we learn and grow. And I demonstrate to them that even when they mess up, like I'm not going to laugh at them, right? I'm not going to point it out. Instead, I'm going to prompt questions or ideas or give them solutions to help troubleshoot. So that's really what I wanted to share about my trip to DC. It was really awesome showing my husband where I spent probably one of my most transformative experiences in my life. Showing him my old apartment, visiting favorite and new museums, and of course, celebrating our anniversary. Thank you also for being part of my journey and allowing me to be a part of yours. If you like what you heard in this vlog, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Leave a heart emoji if you watch this whole video, and let me know if you've been to DC and what your favorite memory is. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye.